Welcome. Today we are looking at K.C.S.E revision 51, paper 1. Thanks a lot for subscribing. We start with the questions so you can attempt them and then you mark for yourself as I read out the answers. Outline 7 teachings about human beings from the creation accounts. Give 7 consequences of Adam and Eve's disobedience to God in the creation accounts. Give reasons why some Christians find it difficult to read the Bible today. Question 2a. Explain 7 importance of circumcision to Abraham and his descendants. Discuss the challenges experienced by Abraham in his life. Explain how the promises given to Abraham were fulfilled among the Jews. Question 3a. Explain the factors that encouraged the Israelites to engage in idolatry. Give reasons why Elijah faced danger in Israel. State 6 ways in which leaders in Kenya misuse their powers. Question 4a. Identify 6 differences between the Old Testament and the African traditional prophets. B. Describe the forms of punishment that were going to come upon Israel and other nations according to Prophet Amos. C. What is the relevance of Prophet Amos' teachings on judgment to Christians today? Question 5a. Explain 4 symbolic acts of hope and restoration as foretold by Jeremiah. B. Outline 6 instances when Jeremiah encountered suffering. C. Explain the features of the new covenant understood by Prophet Jeremiah. Question 6a. Outline 7 duties of traditional African healers. Give 7 reasons why sex education was mainly taught by grandparents. C. Explain the religious significance of the environment in the traditional African communities. Let us look at the answers. Teaching about human beings from the creation accounts. Man is dependent on God for everything, for example, food. Human beings have a responsibility towards other creatures. Human beings were given authority to name animals. They are co-creators with God. They were told to multiply and feed the earth and subdue it. They are special creatures. They were created in God's likeness and image. They are social beings. God saw that man was lonely and he created the woman to be his companion. Human beings have to relate with God. God communicated with man, for example. After they ate the fruit, God talked to them. Human beings are expected to work and have leisure as God worked and rested on the 7th day. Human beings have same origin and destiny created by God and goes back to the soil. B. Consequences of Adam and Eve's disobedience to God. The creation account. Eve's pain during delivery was increased. Women were made to be subordinate to man. Adam was told he would sweat and toil to earn a living. They were alienated from God. The cordial relationship that they had with God turned to fear. They were chased from the Garden of Eden. The ground was cursed so that it would not produce or yield food easily. Enmity between human beings and animals was created. The animals became wild, yet they used to mix freely with them. Death was introduced. Adam and Eve were not going to live as originally intended by God. Human beings became prone to sin. Question 3. Reasons why some Christians find it difficult to read the Bible today. Some find it difficult to interpret it. Some are illiterate. They are busy with other activities, that is, they lack time. They lack interest in the Bible. They fear reading it due to rebuking. They lack faith in the Bible. Bibles are expensive. They have the misconception that the Bible is read only on Sundays. Existence of many versions of the Bible makes it difficult for them to identify the best. Lack of a reading culture. They are lazy and have a negative attitude towards being seen reading the Bible. Question 2a. Importance of circumcision to Abraham and his descendants. Circumcision gave the Israelites a sense of belonging. It made them to feel they were descendants of Abraham. It acted as a sign of the covenant that God entered with Abraham. It was a mark of identity, and the individual was known to be a Jew if he was circumcised. It was a religious activity commanded by God and had to be observed from one generation to another. It was a sign of God's obedience to God's command. It signified a strong bond of relationship between his descendants and God. It was a constant reminder of their commitment to God. It acted as an assurance of blessings of the promises given to Abraham. Question 2b. Challenges experienced by Abraham in his life. He was to depart from familiar land to unknown land of Canaan. Question 2b. Challenges experienced by Abraham in his life. He was to depart from familiar land to unknown land of Canaan. He experienced sorrow when his father died. He encountered harsh climate on his long journey to Canaan. Doubts assailed him when God delayed his fulfilling his promise to give him a son. Abraham and Sarah had no child for a long time. The Egyptian threatened to take his wife Sarah until he had to pretend he was his sister. He had to endure the temptation to sacrifice his son Isaac. He became a nomad due to harsh climate in Canaan. How the promises given to Abraham were fulfilled among the Jews. They inherited the land of Canaan, which was presented to Abraham. Israel became a great nation at the time of King David. Many kings such as David, Solomon, and Josiah ruled. They constantly praised their ancestor Abraham as a great man. They multiplied to form many descendants, i.e. the 12 tribes. Before exile, the Jews were blessed with prosperity in trade and agriculture. God punished the nation that oppressed the Israelites. The Israelites were foreigners in Egypt for 100 years, but later liberated. The ancestor Abraham died at an old age of 120 years. They entered into covenant with God at Mount Sinai as promised to Abraham. On Mount Sinai, God promised to use Israel as an instrument through which other nations would be blessed. Question 3a. Factors that encouraged the Israelites to engage in idolatry. They were attacked by local Canaanite religion, which seemed superior than their own religion. They believed that a God is only powerful in his own land. Failure by the Israelites to destroy the places of worship of Canaanite gods. Intermarriages with foreigners. The kings married foreign wives who brought with them idols to be worshipped. Setting up of idols to be worshipped at Bethel and done by King Jeroboam. Disregard of Jerusalem as a center of worship by King Jeroboam. Jeroboam encouraged people to offer sacrifice to the golden calves he had set up at Bethel and Dan. Establishing other places of worship on hilltops, thus copying other nations. Choosing priests from ordinary families to serve Yahweh at the centers of worship. Changing of the Jewish calendar and adapting the Canaanite calendar. The kings of Israel, like Jeroboam, participated in idol worship that's misleading the people. Reasons why Elijah faced danger in Israel. He pronounced drought in Israel that lasted for 3.5 years. He rebuked King Ahab and Jezebel for their evil deeds. For example, case of Naboth's vineyard. They were more false prophets than the prophets of Yahweh and therefore influenced the decisions of the king. Jezebel's ability to use her powers negatively because of her position as a queen. Elijah ordered the killing of Baal's prophets after the contest at Mount Carmel. He escaped into wilderness to secure his life, but he encountered more danger while there. That is, he encountered starvation and encounter with old animals. A family stood for the worship of Yahweh. Elijah prophesied for the destruction of Ahab and his entire family. Question 3c. Ways in which leaders in Kenya misuse their powers, engaging in bribery in order to be acquitted in courts. They practice nepotism, offering jobs to their close relatives instead of considering qualifications. Misuse of public funds and property. Funds meant for medical and educational purpose is used for personal gain. Land grabbing. Those in influential government positions acquire land through unjust means. Those in public offices offer unsubstantial services, for example, in public hospitals. Giving threats to those who question their actions. Question 4a. Differences between Old Testament and African traditional prophets. Old Testament prophets were appointed and received their power from God, while African traditional prophets received their powers through inheritance. Old Testament prophets taught on issues affecting all nations, while African traditional prophets were confined to their ethnic communities. Old Testament prophets were rejected by their own people, while the African traditional prophets were respected and honored by their people. The Old Testament prophets emphasized on monotheism, while some African traditional prophets recognized and worshipped many gods and goddesses. The prophecies of the Old Testament prophets were recorded, while those of the African traditional prophets were passed on through oral traditions. The Old Testament prophets had an idea about the Messiah, while those of African traditional society had no idea about the Messiah. Question 4b. The forms of punishment that were going to come upon Israel and other nations according to Prophet Amos. God was going to send a divine fire upon the nations that had committed sin against God. That is Syrian Tyre. The fire would destroy the nations for their sins they committed against God and Israel. Exile. Israel would be attacked by Assyria. The entire community will be deported. They will try to hide, but they will be pursued. The rich would not be spared. Destruction of marketplaces, public assemblies, and even the rural areas. All their defenses would be destroyed. The holy and high places would be spared. Death. Many people will be killed during the attack in the cities and the fields. Everybody will be affected, and there will be no mourners. Attack by Philistine. There was epidemic. Those who will escape the attack by the Syrians will be attacked by a plague. One person would survive in an infected house. Those who would survive will be filled with sorrow and loneliness. Earthquake. This would destroy the houses of both the rich and the poor. The whole place would be a field of debris. Famine of the word of God. God would withdraw his message from the people. People would move from place to place in search of God's word. Eclipse. God would send darkness that would cover the whole land. Question 4c. What is the relevance of Prophet Amos' teachings on judgment to Christians today? God will judge evil and punish the wrongdoers. Christians should be courageous and face life situations. God is universal and will pass judgment on all nations. Christians have to put God's teaching into practice to avoid false holiness. God hates sin, which is why he judges all nations. Christians should prepare for the judgment day by being obedient to the word of God. Evil will be judged and eventually destroyed. Christians are reminded to shun evil and live according to God's will. Question 5a. Explain 4 symbolic acts of hope and restoration as foretold by Jeremiah. There was vision of the basket of figs. Jeremiah saw the vision of the 2 baskets of figs. The basket of good fruits signified the remnants that God was going to preserve from exile and allow to prosper in the land. There was hope of survival of Israel after judgment. The bad fruits were the people who remained in Judah, or those who escaped, and God was going to punish them. The buying of a field to signify his faith in God, promises of restoration of his people. There was hope that God would bring back his people and would reclaim their land. They would reconstruct their houses. The wooden ox yoke. Jeremiah was supposed to walk around with a yoke around his neck as a sign of suffering and captivity. It was also as a sign of hope if the people of Judah were willing to submit to the Babylonian rule. Their yoke will be broken and they will be set free. A letter to the exiles. That is in Jeremiah chapter 29. Jeremiah wrote to the people of Judah a letter of encouragement while in Israel, when in exile, They had despaired and thought that God had neglected them. They were encouraged to settle, build houses, marry, have children, and live in peace, and pray for their rulers. They were not to listen to false prophets. Question 5b. Instances when Jeremiah encountered suffering. When he was rejected by his own family and relatives at Anathoth, they even plotted to kill him. When he was falsely accused of blasphemy after delivering the temple sermon, he was given death threats when he prophesied about the destruction of the temple by the priests and the prophets. His personal life pushed him to live a life of solitude and loneliness. He was not allowed to marry, attend funerals or weddings. This made him to encounter frustration and emotional anguish. He suffered pain in his heart because he knew that his people were going to be destroyed, yet they continued to be stubborn and rebellious. He was imprisoned in an underground cell by Pasha, the priest, where he was beaten and chained overnight at a temple gate. He was mocked by his people because his prophecies had not been fulfilled. The accusations caused Jeremiah psychological and emotional suffering. He went through spiritual struggle in his relationship with God. He experienced deep trials of faith, doubts, frustration, self-pity, and despair. He even questioned God why he was not taking action on his prophecies. He felt discouraged. Jeremiah was put in a dark dungeon, which was dark, lonely, terrifying, and life-threatening. Jeremiah was scared and mentally tortured. Jeremiah was tied with ropes and lowered down into a muddy cistern. The well was muddy and cold and scaring, and was also left without food. While in prison, Jeremiah was starved to death in an attempt to kill him. Features of the new covenant as taught by prophet Jeremiah. In the new covenant, people would have personal knowledge of God. God's laws would be written in people's hearts, unlike in the old covenant, where the law was written on stone tablets. In the new covenant, there would be spontaneous forgiveness of sins, which was not in the old covenant. In the new covenant, each individual would be responsible for his or her own sins. It would be an everlasting covenant. The covenant relationship would not be broken. The new covenant would be established after God's punishment on Israel. It would lead to establishment of a new Israel, a new people of God. It would establish a new beginning, unlike in the old covenant, where they were remembering deliverance from Egypt. But in the new, they would be remembering restoration. The new covenant would be initiated by God. The restored community would be ruled by Russia's king. Question 6. Duties of traditional African healers. They treated the sick. They gave instructions on how the herbs were to be drunk and boiled. They carefully listened to people's problems in order to be able to diagnose their problems. They showed concern and compassion to the people's problems. They analyzed the information given to them carefully in order to identify the cause of the problem. They prescribed the solution to problems presented to them. That is, they offered remedies. They made appointments for future consultations, that is, follow-ups. They provided protection against evil. For example, they gave protective charms against witchcraft. They solved problems of infertility in human beings and animals. They gave advice to patients and warriors. They also gave guidance and counseling. They were called upon to preside over ceremonies such as initiation ceremonies. Reasons why sex education was mainly taught by grandparents. They were knowledgeable on issues related to sex, basically they experienced. They were wise and knew how to pass information to the youth. They had enough life experience to handle the youth. They spent more time with the youth because the children used to sleep in grandparents' houses. It was the duty of the society to guide and counsel the youth. Youth were free with them. They respected the early people and took seriously their teachings. Question 6. The religious significance of the environment in traditional African communities. The environment was created by God, so therefore it was sacred. Also taken using the soil in some communities. Most communities believed in the land which was given to them by God. Most communities believed that their land was given to them by God. Certain places like mountains, forests, caves, trees, rivers were given religious significance and they served as a place of worship. Certain animals served as totems and those regarded as sacred by those communities. Environmental issues such as rain, drought, and vegetation demonstrated a relationship between God and the environment. So they invoked God to intervene if there were bad signs or thanked God if there were good signs. Rites of passages were connected to the environment. Circumcision, blood poured on the land symbolized the bond with ancestors. They believed the spirits dwell in the environment. The environment was sacred. The environment was created by God and therefore sacred. Did you understand? Can you let me know in the comment section? Also, let me know what video you can look at tomorrow. Thanks a lot for subscribing and listening to me. God bless you.